This video is a better, complete explanation of the Africans that landed in America in 1619, known as the 1619 Africans. It provides pride among the misery. First, some background knowledge to expose that the Portuguese had gained navigation abilities through combined foundational science of the Arabic world with the work of Jewish scholars, translations in Europe. And yes, Portugal absorbed this knowledge and merged it with its own shipbuilding innovations to create the caravel, enabling long-distance navigation. We know innovation is always a key to unlock a world's power, whether good or bad. It was this combination of Arabic science, Jewish scholarship, and Portuguese engineering produced advanced navigation that carried Portugal to the shores of West Africa in 1441. Please watch my video called 1441 Slavery Kidnapped. Meanwhile, Portugal used its capability to expand violently into Africa, establishing fortified trading posts and beginning the extraction of gold, copper, ivory, and enslaved people. Spain had no control over Portugal at this time. In 1480, things changed for Portugal. Spain only gained rule over Portugal, though, in 1580 after Portugal's royal line collapsed and Philip II of Spain claimed the throne. Spain absorbed Portugal's African networks during the Iberian Union from 1580 to 1640, becoming the richest European empire. Meanwhile, the Dutch, fighting Spain in the 80 Years' War, which was in 1568 to 1648, issued letters of marque that English privateers used to legally attack Portuguese ships. Now that the significance of how innovation shapes cultural power, sometimes unleashing horrors, sometimes creating progress, and sometimes there is a silver lining buried deeply within. Hold these events in mind as history ventures further. Because in 1619, something significant happened, something extraordinary, something that deserves real thought. Because this event reshapes how we understand the beginning of America. Consider this. In 1619, it was 1 year before the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock. So Africans in the U.S. are older than the English colonizers of the Mayflower. And I say this because the Mayflower passengers were English subjects who were leaving England. This was just 12 years after Jamestown was founded by people who were here in the name of the English crown, the King of England, colonizers as well. And we see Africans here in this country, the U.S. of America. And the way it happened is going to amaze you again. Just who were Africans that came to America? Across West Africa were people whose genetic roots had shared ancestry with Nile Valley cultures, North Africa, broader African societies, and the ancient ancestors of the Natuvians. What is often taught is that African societies were already practicing slavery. Here is the honest truth. These networks did not simply discard people or dehumanize them. In many cases, defeated tribesmen voluntarily presented themselves to the neighboring communities or kingdoms, knowing they would be absorbed into structured roles rather than annihilated. And when people say African kings sold their own people, quote unquote, into the Atlantic slave system, we must ask, did these kings truly have a choice? And did they even have a concept of slavery in the European sense? European traders introduced a system that was foreign, brutal, and outside African cultural logic, and they threw money, goods, and weapons at chiefs to force participation and to cover their own injustices. When conflicts occurred and rival groups were defeated, many individuals were integrated into existing social systems. West African kingdoms had long-standing methods for receiving outsiders, assigning them roles based on skill, age, strength, or craft. Some became craftsmen, metalworkers, or builders. Others served as royal attendants, throne carriers, porters, musicians, messengers, or agricultural workers. In some regions, they entered artisan guilds, military units, or palace service. This was not random. It was organized, regulated, and part of a broader cultural logic that had existed for centuries. These societies understood how to integrate newcomers into economic, political, and ceremonial life. There were no primitive people or Negroes. These people were not primitive. They came from organized, capable societies, the same deep ancestral populations whose descendants became the Zulu, Xhosa, Fula, the people of Benin, the Oyo, and many others across Africa. They were mentally and physically capable, fully part of the same human traditions that shaped great African civilizations. I know you have not considered the meaning of the next statement, but now that the who and the why have been established, let's observe the when and how. The moment when the West African population, who would become African colonizers in the United States, just like the English colonizers, continued the presence of Africans established by the transatlantic slave trade, the same people. And to be specific, there was no slavery in the English colonies at their arrival, so by definition, they should be considered colonizers. To be clear, they should be considered colonizers not in the sense of searching for a better life or representing the King of England, but in the historical sense of being among the first people on the land outside of the indigenous. They entered a foreign colony, lived in it, and became part of its settlement structure. And chronologically, they sit between the Jamestown and the Mayflower ship residents, both of whom are considered colonizers. This African colonizing event began in 1618, 1 year prior to 1619, and 2 years before the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock. It began with the West African culture known as the Nyongo, and what historians call the Nyongo War. Africans from the Kingdom of Nyongo in West Central Africa, present-day Angola, were continuing their existence of innovation. These were people with culture, skills, and self-determination. They were developed in agriculture, ironworking, cultural expression, and participated in military defense. They had long since shaped the local landscape. surviving the trek from Ethiopia up the Nile Valley, migrating through Chad and reaching Nigeria. They would have been involved in the establishment of the Nok culture and its grandeur around 1500 BC. In 1618, the Portuguese came to the kingdom of Nyanggo under attack by Portuguese colonial forces and Imbagala mercenaries. The Nyanggo warriors used iron-tipped spears, shields made of hide or wood, bows and arrows, battle formations, organized military units. They had ironworking expertise that Europeans actually admired. They had military traditions going back centuries. They were a real army faced against what the Portuguese and Imbagala had, which were matchlock muskets, cannons, gunpowder, steel armor, war dogs, mounted cavalry, and the Imbagala mercenaries brought brutal raiding tactics, night attacks, child soldiers, and ritualized violence. It was guns plus cannons plus armor plus mercenary armies against a kingdom fighting warriors, brave, skilled, and organized for war. Although muskets could kill from a distance, cannons could destroy fortifications, steel armor protected Portuguese soldiers from spear strikes. Imbangala raiders attacked at night, burning villages. Portuguese forces had horses. The Nyanggo fighters fought on foot. They leaned to their iron-forged weapons and organized skill as they faced Portuguese muskets, cannons, and armored soldiers. One might consider a devastating imbalance that made capture almost inedible. Portuguese forces and Imbangala mercenaries raided Nyanggo villages, confirmed where homes burned, families separated, and people seized in groups. Some were taken after battles, some were taken during night raids, some were taken while fleeing. These Africans were captured during a series of wars and slave raiding campaigns in 1618 to 1619. This is documented in Portuguese accounts of the Nyanggo War. Because the Portuguese were only able to move 300 plus captives on one ship, that tells us something very real about the war. It was not easy for Portugal. Nyanggo resistance was strong. The Imbagala had to be hired because Portugal could not win alone. The Portuguese loaded these hundreds of Nyanggo people as captives onto the Spanish slave ship called San Juan Bautista. The capture of 300 plus people does not prove Nyanggo was defeated. It only proves that the Nyanggo people fought. It also proves that the Portuguese and their mercenaries were able to seize a small, vulnerable portion of the population, not the kingdom itself. There are no Nyanggo records stating they lost this war. The only accounts come from the Portuguese, who reported capturing just over 300 people, a number far too small to represent a defeated kingdom. During the trek to the ship, their wrists were tied with heavy ropes and they wore neck yokes. They were given little food and water, beatings for slowing down, crying and exhaustion. People were collapsing and people were dying along the way. This is consistent with all documented slave marches in Angola. They were taken to Porto de Luanda and held in barracoons, which are holding pens. Women and children were kept in separate pens. Men were restrained more heavily. The ship was headed for Veracruz, Mexico. Conditions were brutal. There was disease and starvation. They were packed tightly, chained, tied. There was sickness, dehydration, praying in Kambundu, their language, and calling out the names of family members. Children cried for parents. Women cried for children. Men moaned from pain. This is not speculation. It is consistent with documented Middle Passage conditions. Stay tuned for the silver lining buried deeply within. The following warfare is the beginning of the silver lining buried deeply within the misery of the stolen Ninyango people. Unknowing to the captured Ninyango people, somewhere in the Caribbean, 2 English privateer ships, the White Lion and the Treasurer, appear on the intense waves of the sea. As they search for a Portuguese slave ship they are prepared to attack. 10 hours pass before the ship finally enters its scope, a distant silhouette that beckons the White Lion to come closer. The White Lion obliges, confirming that the vessel ahead is indeed the San Juan Bautista it has been searching for. The Portuguese ship braces itself, preparing for an adventure that may end with the privateers sunk once and for all. The chase is on. In less than an hour, the White Lion positions itself at the starboard side of its target. The guns are loaded. Captain, lay down your arms and request our aboard. No response is heard. The captain of the White Lion sends a new message, this time with blazing cannon fire. A full blast warning shots follows. The privateer ship surrenders its bounty. Continues. Please select the subscribe button to be notified of the next episode. Thank you for watching.